take 50,007, whatever. Hi, my name is Dave, aka DC. Welcome to my garage. This is my car. It's a 1991 Toyota Celica GT-Four RC. Basically, I picked up this car in 2015, crash damaged. And over the years, I've basically spent a whole bunch of time and effort to get the car back on the road and repair it as best as possible. Now, with this car, it is now for sale. So it's time for me to basically say goodbye, and subsequently I'm making this video so that you understand what I've done with the car and get a visual overview around the car's condition, so that you can make a decision if you're wanting to purchase this car. So basically picked up the car in 2015, crash damage with the bumper and the bonnet, basically damaged, as well as the front radiator support bar across the top. Subsequently, those items have been now fixed, obviously. Once I basically got the car, my friend Nick and we basically identified that there was a whole bunch of underlying issues wrong with the car, which basically would prevent it from getting a warrant of fitness here in New Zealand. Subsequently, it's been a long road to get this car back up and running, and to a condition which is actually warranted and registered for New Zealand roads. So we'll start with the engine and the engine bay. So the engine and gearbox, they've been removed, and basically the engine and all its ancillaries and the gearbox has all been cleaned up. The engine bay has also been freshly painted as well. So previously this car was black and was painted a pearl white by the previous owner. Subsequently, they didn't do the engine bay at the time. So when I found some underlying issues when I had initially put the car back together and was running it, I found that, well, the engine bay was looking pretty tatty. So I basically pulled out everything from the engine bay and stripped it all back, and then basically I got the help of Josh, who's another member on the GT-Four OC, New Zealand GT-Four Owners Club, and we basically stripped everything back, and then I wet sanded everything after priming, and then we got the engine bay painted. So probably the two things of note is that this car was crash damaged. So basically this radiator support across here was basically damaged, and I'll just chuck some photos in here. But I've also, from that, I've had to replace this headlight retractor unit, and I just put the old cover back on, and replaced the steel RC bonnet with this aluminium bonnet, and the bumper with the fiberglass bumper. I was quite lucky because the aluminium support for the RC bumper wasn't damaged at the time, so I was still able to reuse that. I did get, for this radiator support bar, which goes across here, I did actually cut out the old one and replace it with another Celica's one to fix that. So coming back to the engine, so basically, because I removed everything, pretty much everything has had a cleanup in terms of being looked at, and I mean literally everything in this engine bay has completely been removed, and I'll chuck some photos in here. Subsequently, putting everything back, I've replaced various hoses and lines to make sure that everything is working properly and it's not leaking. So basically, probably the couple of highlights is that the hoses from hell underneath the exhaust manifold for the water piping have been replaced, and I've checked all of the water to air intercooler lines and pumps, and nothing is leaking, so that's really good. I've also changed the gasket on the rocker cover as well, so that was also replaced, and it's amazing because it's a 3S GT without a leaking engine. No oil leaks at all. Now the engine has done about 229,000 kilometers or so. I picked it up around about 227 or 226. So in my ownership of 6 years, I've only traveled about just over 2,000 kilometers, simply because the car's literally been sitting in a garage being worked on. So it hasn't had much mileage during my ownership period. In terms of the turbo, the engine, when I picked up the car, it didn't come with a bunch of things actually. It didn't have an exhaust, it didn't have a turbo, the car wasn't running, there's obviously the crash damage, there's a broken window at the back, there were damaged seats, there's just a whole bunch of stuff. So I've replaced the turbo with a CT20B from an SD205. Now the original turbo did not come with the car. I was just given a standard CT26, which is gone bye-bye. So if you wanted the specific steel-wheeled turbo for an RC, unfortunately I can't help you, so you might have to find that with your own resources if you can. In terms of the other ancillaries around the engine bay, obviously I've had to repair and replace a lot of things. With all of the various brackets, everything got cleaned up, so I didn't waste time, just, I should really rephrase this. I spent a lot of time doing cleaning up all the little things, right? So if it's a bracket, then I painted it or plasti dipped it to coat it properly. If it was broken, I fixed it. So as an example, one of the oil cooler for the gearbox, the mounts were on the AC unit and they were rusted out, so I fixed those up and replaced them. I also attached the heat exchanger for the water to air intercooler properly, so made those changes as well. I found this reservoir from another club member, a former club member, grabbed that off him, replaced the strut brace, did all manner of things, and I'll do a bit of a photo documentation of that. So this uses the stock radiator and water to air intercooler system. It works great. This pump is really good. It's strong. There's no issues with the circulation of the water to air system. Various seals, gaskets, hoses replaced. Covered that. The cam belt was changed by the previous owner at about 170 kilometers. And currently we're sitting at about 200, they call it 229, 230, so it's had about 60,000 kilometers on it. At that time, they also replaced the water pump as well, I believe. Now, I did pull off the sump and clean that all out, and resealed the sump to the engine block as well. When I had the gearbox off the engine, what we did find is that the gearbox wasn't actually attached to the engine properly, and it was actually wobbling, and we couldn't engage the clutch. And from further investigation, once we got the engine and the gearbox out, we actually found that one of the previous owners down the line had actually cut one of the mounting legs off the engine block, which allows the gearbox to attach to. So there's 4 points which the gearbox attaches to the engine, and subsequently one of those points was cut off at the back. It's pretty typical where the the owners may not have the right technique to get the gearbox onto the engine, especially with the center diff. And subsequently, what people do is that they cut it off. In this case, they used an angle grinder of some sort, and then used a hammer and broke off the piece of metal, and then put the gearbox back on. Subsequently, I fixed the attachment point or mounting point for the gearbox to the engine with some 5mm steel. So this is the original engine and the original gearbox that comes with the RC. So this is the close ratio gearbox that comes with the RC, and it also comes with the torsion diff, rear diff at the back as well. So it's all factory. There's been no replacement of those drivetrain components. Now, in terms of mounting, I have got some speed source urethane mounts for front and rear for the engine. We changed the fuel filter back in 2016, so it's only been a couple of 2,000 odd kilometers on the fuel filter in the engine bay, and currently I'm using a Deutschwerks DW300 fuel pump in the rear. In terms of spark plugs, they use Denso iridiums, and I replaced the ignition leads and distributor back in 2016 when I was initially putting the car back together. The clutch is a standard clutch. It is a brand new one, and the flywheel was machined at the same time before reinstallation. For the wheel and suspension package of the RC, I chose a Koya Drift Tech, and I was working with Andre at Cooper's Tires to basically get these wheels custom painted in a Subaru STI Gold. So the Koyas are 18 by 8 front and rear with custom offsets. So it's a plus 25 offset on the front two wheels and a plus 15 on the rear. In terms of suspension, well, I've upgraded the front struts with some KYB XLG gas inserts, and the rear struts are just factory. So in terms of brakes, I have replaced the brake pads front and rear, and I've replaced the brake discs front and rear, as well as the handbrake shoes in the back. So as I noted earlier, we had the engine and gearbox out and refreshed the engine bay. Alongside of that, we did identify that the steering rack mount was actually broken. So this is where the steering rack mounts to on the firewall, and subsequently we needed to fix that and replace that. So I worked with Josh to basically cut out a section out of another old GT4 which was being wrecked, and basically we got the panel. I cleaned up the panel and then removed the old panel steering rack mount, and then welded in the new panel, seam sealed everything, and that was all done before we got the engine bay all cleaned up. In terms of drivetrain, so obviously this is an all-wheel drive system, so it basically has front differential, center differential and rear differential. Now those haven't been changed, they are factory as noted earlier. What I have done is done some maintenance items. So on this side, the inner CV housing was damaged, so I repaired that. I've repaired or replaced various CV boots and re-greased the CVs. Coming from front to rear or middle, basically there was an issue with the hanger bearings as well as the seal for the main prop shaft center joint. It was actually a CV joint, but basically I had to replace that seal, but the new bearings which I bought from the mount shop actually failed because they're the wrong dimensions. Video for another day. So subsequently I've put in the prop shaft from my other GT4 into the car to replace that, and it's all running smoothly. Now in terms of the rear diff and subframe, there's been no changes to the rear subframe. I did have to change the rear diff mount, so that's basically a brand new item as of 2019, so 2,000 kilometers on it. Don't think there's anything else. Let me just check. Right, new rear diff mount, December 2019. Various CVs re-greased, new boots. Sorry, I do have the list here. Okay. So in terms of an exhaust system, the car runs a 2.5-inch exhaust from the front cat all the way back. Basically, I built the exhaust system, so I can TIG. So I built the whole exhaust system, and it goes to an RPS muffler. So that's a 2.5-inch exhaust system, which is plenty for this car. Let's open up the car and have a look at the interior. Welcome to the interior of the GT-Four RC. So the interior has got the confetti style pattern seats. On the driver's side, the bolster was actually damaged, and so I replaced the bolster with one from a NA, as well as changing the material for the pattern. The seats have actually been disassembled to wash the covers for the front seats, and basically the rear seats have also had a good wash as well, just with a wet and dry vacuum. Now there is some sun fade across the top of the rear seats. That's pretty typical for the hatches. With the RC, it did come with obviously the short ratio gear stick, so it's basically 3 stud versus a 4 stud for the later generations. It does come with the factory Momo steering wheel, which came with the RCs. This car in particular, because it is the JDM RC version, it doesn't have the numbering plaques. It doesn't have the number plaques to basically identify which number of the production line it is. Now it does have the VIN plate, which identifies that this is a genuine RC, so that's pretty good. And even when I check the frame number against the Toyota electronics parts catalog, because you can actually do that, it is actually a genuine RC, so good stuff there. Now from an interior perspective, I've replaced a bunch of different panels from other Celicas to ensure that it's trying to get back to a stock interior. So the A-pillar was changed over, various plastics were changed back, either because they were too marked or there was a HKS turbo timer in here, and there's just a whole bunch of sticky adhesive crap on there. So the dash is slightly warped, as is with a lot of the Celicas. The warping happens around the air vent, and there's nothing much you can do about it except for basically getting a full repair on the dash, or finding someone with a non-warped dash, which is absolutely rare. The steering wheel is a bit worn as well, but it is a factory steering wheel, and it is the Momo, so not sure what you'll do with that going forward. In terms of electronics, so I got a Cobra AK 4138 Thatcham Category 1 alarm installed. So it's basically the premium alarm from Obsessive Security here in Wellington. Cost around about 900 bucks or something, 850, 900 bucks. And it's basically got 3 immobilizer cuts. It's absolutely top rated, so it comes with 2 key fobs as well. So the car is as secure, I guess, as you can get it, and it has the ultrasonic sensors up on top of the A-pillars up here. In terms of the ECU, so this is the factory standard ECU, and basically with the ECUs, because of the age of the car, the capacitors can leak and also damage the circuit board that they're attached to. So I got my friend up in Auckland to replace the various caps on the circuit board. So that's a maintenance item that has been done for trouble-free motoring. Now I do have a Go Fast Bits boost controller, G-Force 2 boost controller, plumbed in. I actually haven't set that to anything specific because I haven't really driven the car in anger, but it is there to control the boost, especially since I used the CT20B up front. Has a little JVC CD player that does play MP3s, yay! Doesn't have USB, it's just an old thing, so feel free to replace that as you wish. And in terms of speakers, I think it's just got the front 4-inch speakers and tweeters. There's nothing in the doors. The car didn't come with any speakers in the doors, and I never got around to installing any speakers. I think there's one rare speaker at the back. That was on a to-do list, but never got around to it. In terms of the wiring, so basically to repair the steering rack mount across the firewall, basically I had to take out the whole dash as well as remove some of that wiring just to be able to get access into that panel area from this side. It's quite an intensive job if you've never done it before, but basically the whole dash has been out. In terms of the wiring loom, when it came off, everything looked intact. It was all good from an internal wiring loom perspective. In terms of the engine bay, now because it gets hot, I did find that there were a bunch of broken plugs and connections in the engine bay. So I've done my best to replace almost all of the plugs. I believe I actually have replaced all of the plugs, thinking about it now, on that engine loom. So basically I went up to the scrapyard, identified the plug, grabbed it, and then put it, replaced it, undeepened the loom, repaired any cracks in the loom, especially around the insulation, and then put that back together to make sure that the loom is all good. Right, we'll go back to the boot and I'll show you in there. So at the back of the car, obviously with the RC, we've got the Gen 2 lights, so they've got that rounded look to them. The parcel tray is a parcel tray which doesn't have holes in it, doesn't have speaker holes in it. It's quite amazing to actually get one which doesn't have holes in it. I actually think I got that off Greg. So one of the things with the tray is that it's missing the brackets that hold the tray in place. So those need to be little clips that need to be found. Haven't found those yet. And then on this tray, this little string is just busted, so that can be replaced at some point. Just never got round to it. So as you can see, it is a parcel tray which isn't damaged, and we do have the fading across the top of the seats, but they have been washed, cleaned. Got the original panels in terms of plastics on the quarters and the rear, and the carpet, and the spare wheel is still in place. In terms of body work, is probably a keen thing to look at with this car. You may want to change the boot struts. I've already replaced them once, but those were second hand, so you may want to get some new ones because the struts don't really hold the boot for a long period of time unless it's a nice warm day. So going back to the body work, so first things first is the spoiler. So this is how I got the car, and basically the spoiler has chipped in places like here. So what I was going to do at one point was replace the spoiler and get it repainted to match the car. So that might be something that needs to be done, that you choose to do. Some bastard bloody debadged the car, and as you may know or not know, the RC badges are out of stock and discontinued, so you can't replace them unless you find one second hand. You may be able to find one on eBay or something. I haven't found one yet, but that is something to look for. Now, I was going to get a sticker to replace it, but haven't got around to that point yet. In terms of damage to the vehicle, basically come down here. So basically there is a mark that goes across here, and there was an impact across there. Now these are 2 marks on the bumper which came with the car. Yeah, maybe the paint can be redone on that one. In terms of other major things, we've pretty much got a clean car. Coming around to just over the wheel, so we do have this mark over here. There's a bit of a gouge in the paint, so that will need to be fixed at some point. So when the previous owner put the car back together, I'm not sure exactly how they removed the bump strips, but they are a bit rough, so they do stick out a bit compared to where they should be sitting. And this one has got a little bit of a crack in there, so that one's just sticking out. So it might be something to look at when you look at the bodywork of the car. For the most part, it is a very straight car. I can't see any pins or dents across the roof, so that's really encouraging. But coming down the side, we do have the bump strips, which are not the best, so it might be something to consider. Right, so we're at the front of the car. So the bumper was repainted to the pearl white of the car's colour, as well as the bonnet. Now, as noted, I did replace this retractor unit in here, and had to replace various plastic panels as well as the light in order to make the repairs and that light. Where possible, I have tried to use the factory mesh. So on the sides of the bumpers, those are the factory mesh portions, or factory mesh inserts for the bumper, but for the center, because this is a fiberglass replacement, I basically have just polyurethaned black mesh into place. In terms of the bonnet, now the bonnet is fiberglass, so it is not like a perfect steel bonnet. Please note, RCs came with steel bonnets, they did not come with aluminium bonnets. ST205s came with aluminium bonnets. So the vent is the vent and the lines are all built into the mold, as well as this hole. So this is the vent for the cam cover, but is not functional. So basically it doesn't have a hole in here. Doesn't have a hole in there, which would then vent down into the cam cover. One bad thing around this bonnet is that because it's fiberglass, hopefully you can see it. It's not, maybe not really coming up that well. Oh, there we are. So basically, because it's fiberglass, it's a bit delicate, and the way that we're trying to get the bonnet down at one point, we basically cracked the paint on the bonnet. So this is where the mounting point for the bonnet is, for the latch underneath. And at one point we basically pressed down really hard and we just cracked the paint. So I'd probably redo the bonnet paint, so get it stripped back, and then fill this cavity underneath the bonnet with some foam just to support it, so that when it closes it's not going to crack the paint. See, being a 25+ year old car, oh no, actually 30 years old now, 1991, yeah, 30 years old, is in pretty good condition. Obviously it's not perfect, especially since it's had a repaint, but still in really good condition. So thank you very much for your time to review the car with me and look at all of the things that I've done over the past six years of my ownership. Thank you to Nick and Josh and others for helping out where they could to get the car back on the road. You know, the original intention for this car when I first purchased it was to save it from the wreckers, which I have done. So I'm really happy when I got the car warranted and registered for the road back in 2019. Obviously last year during COVID was a bit of a downtime, and I did some maintenance items So, you know, like with any project, it can continue on, and obviously there's more things which can be done to bring the car up to even a better level than it is. For me, at this time, it's time to move on and get back to my original project of the other Celica GT-Four ST185 called Elephant. If you're interested in the car, please let me know. Basically, this car is for sale for New Zealand residents only, and will be offered to members of the New Zealand GT-Four Owners Club Facebook group. The price expectation on this car is, well, the insurance valuation is 32,000 New Zealand dollars, which I think is reflective of the car and the fact that it is a 1 of 5,000 homologation version. The insurance valuation is by Classic Car Consultants based in Hamilton through Mark Joplin. A copy of this valuation will be provided to prospective buyers, and I'll chuck a screenshot of the value. If you like this video, feel free to hit subscribe and follow my channel. I do plan on doing a build series around the Celica GT-Four ST185 A. So that's a wide body but without the RC goodness. But I do have a range of things which I've done for the car, including extra wide body front guards, ST205 motor, a whole bunch of service items and changes, custom wiring loom, a whole bunch of stuff. So once this car is sold to its new owner, I'll be looking at getting onto the Elephant build. So yeah, subscribe and follow if you want to check out that build as we go forward.